Hello. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Women and Children First, the virtual edition. We are so excited tonight to celebrate All Made Up, the power and pitfalls of beauty culture from Cleopatra to Kim Kardashian. I love that title by Rae Nudson. My name is Sarah Hollenbeck. I am the co-owner of Women and Children First. We're one of the last feminist bookstores in the United States. We're so delighted also to have Rae in conversation with Taylor Moore joining us tonight. So thank you all for being here. We begin our virtual events, as we begin all of our events held in the store, with a land acknowledgement. So please join me in acknowledging that the land on which the bookstore stands is the unceded territory of the Peoria, Potawatomi, and Miami people. There are over 75,000 Indigenous people living in Illinois, and we strive to recognize and honor Native literature and community. And we encourage all of you at home watching to look up land acknowledgements and find out the rightful owners of the land where you are viewing tonight's event. Women and Children First is now open. We do have a capacity limit and we do require masks, but we are open 11 to 7 and 10 to 6 on Sundays. So we hope that you'll stop by the bookstore if you're in Chicago. We also continue to offer curbside pickup and we ship anywhere in the United States. For the time being, our events will continue in this virtual land, but we hope to resume in-person events this fall. All right, a few housekeeping notes before we get started. Please show your love for the author by using the chat bar on the side here and letting her know you're here. Also, you can ask a question using the Ask a Question box located at the bottom of the screen. Later in the evening, Taylor will read Rae your questions. Also, if you haven't bought the book yet, you can buy the book by clicking the green box at the bottom of the screen. That will lead you to womenandchildrenfirst.com. And we will fulfill all those orders on Tuesday because the book is not out yet. All Made Up publishes on Tuesday. But place your orders today and we'll ship them all out on Tuesday, or you can come and pick them up in the bookstore. On to the main event. Rae Nudson is a writer specializing in nonfiction essays and reported features on beauty, fashion, and pop culture. Her work has appeared in Esquire, The Cut, Hazlitt, Medium, and The Billfold, among others. She has a bachelor's degree in journalism and history with a specialization in American history from the University of Missouri, and she lives here in Chicago. Taylor Moore is a freelance journalist in Chicago who writes about arts and culture, injustice, and the built environment. She has been published in The Guardian, Vice, the AV Club, the Chicago Reader, and many other publications. And she's a board member of the Asian American Journalists Association in Chicago. This book, I'm not all the way done, but I am loving it so far. It is such a fascinating history of this multi-billion-dollar industry that we so often demean or devalue or pretend like it means nothing. And what Rae does is lay bare how makeup, like so many things, is all about power and how it has been used as a tool to both reinforce and rattle the status quo. So I'm so excited for this conversation. Please join me in welcoming Taylor Moore and Rae Nudson.
Wonderful.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much for the introduction, Sarah. Rae, super excited to speak with you on All Made Up. For some backgrounds, anyone here, Rae and I have been friends and fellow journalists for the past 3 years, and I've always loved her essays and criticism and her reporting on everything from women's health and and like the workplace, pop culture. So was really excited to crack open All Made Up, which I thought was so beautifully written, so incisive, so such a really wide-ranging and comprehensive cultural history of makeup and how beauty has really just using beauty as a prism through which we can understand gender, race, class, wealth, and all these big heavy topics. So was just very. It was like every page I was just like highlighting things. I'm like, oh, I had no clue about this particular piece of history. So I'm thinking that, Rae, that we could open with a reading of your book, and then we can dive into questions. And at around the 7:45 mark, we will be taking audience questions. So feel free to drop questions in the Ask a Question chat box or in the chat box on the right.
Sure. Thank you so much, Taylor. Thank you, everyone, for being here. I'm so excited to celebrate at Women and Children First. But yeah, I will go ahead and start reading from All Made Up. I'm going to read a little bit of the introduction to start. So this is called Why We Need to Talk About Makeup. There is no way to opt out of the influence makeup has on our lives. There is no way to decide that appearance and the cosmetics used to create it don't matter, because the choice about how to present ourselves is never made in a vacuum. Beauty trends change over time, reflecting a culture's shifting tastes and priorities, and that in turn affects what people wear and how they are perceived. Tressie McMillan Cottom writes that beauty isn't what you look like. It's the preferences that reproduce the social order. Appearance matters because as soon as someone steps into view, they send visual signals that could trigger unconscious judgments. People may not be aware of what they are presenting to others, but those signals may affect people's lives in big and small ways every day. No one can skip participating in appearance politics. It matters whether someone believes it does or not, whether someone thinks about it or not, whether someone wants it to or not. No one can stop themselves from being seen. People face the question of what to wear and where to wear it every day. Intuitively, many people know to wear something different to a party with friends than to an office job. This seemingly built-in understanding of socially appropriate self-presentation in ever-shifting contexts likely comes from years of conscious or unconscious data gathering. People see what others are wearing and often try to emulate the generally accepted style. Makeup is a simultaneous reflection of our understanding of the world around us and a presentation of sense of self within that world. In a video tutorial from Rihanna's makeup company Fenty from December 2019, actor Amanda Stenberg demonstrates a makeup look inspired by New Year's Eve. She says she wants the look to be celebratory and all about the glitz and the glam. She uses a blend of blue eyeshadows to create a cat eye shape that extends beyond her eyelid. The lighter, brighter blues are toward the inside corner of her eye, and the darker blues toward the outside. Her dark blue eyeliner comes to a sharp point, extending the length of her eyelids. Her lipstick is a cool purpley brown, topped with a clear iridescent lip gloss. Her makeup is colorful and bold, and she sets it with a powder so she won't sweat it off while dancing. New Year's Eve can be an excuse to wear glitter and bright colors. Parties waiting for midnight may call for glamour that would look out of place in daytime hours. In a different video for Vogue from June 2020, actor Lucy Hale shares her everyday routine for skincare and makeup. In her video, she says that this makeup look is one she'd use for work meetings. She blends a variety of pink eyeshadow over her eyelid, and when she applies a shimmery pink cream shadow to her lower lash line, she warns the viewer about going overboard with the product by saying, "This is still day. We don't want to look like we're going to the club." Hale implies that makeup worn for a night out at a club or party is more about excess and bold colors and shapes, while makeup for a daytime work meeting is less colorful, uses less product, and is less obvious. Hale actually uses 18 products for her makeup look, while Stenberg only uses 12. But Hale's colors are more muted, light pinks to Stenberg's bold blues. Hale's eyeliner rims her eyes and doesn't go outside the lash line, while Stenberg's eyeliner extends past her natural eye shape. Hale's makeup look is not quite natural, but its colors and shapes blend with her skin tone and features. But as Hale notes, what could take her look from meeting appropriate to club ready could be just a bit more product than she used in the demonstration. For example, a winged eyeliner may work for the office, but if that wing extends too long, it becomes a cat eye that's not welcome at most office jobs. What differentiates makeup for work versus makeup for a party is the appearance of excess, not actual excess. Hale's daytime look uses more products and has more steps than Stenberg's New Year's Eve look, but Stenberg's makeup look is bolder. Understanding the difference can be easy in theory, but difficult to navigate in actuality. The lines between day makeup and nighttime party makeup are blurry, and not just because they are expertly blended like Stenberg's eyeshadow. Often, when socially acceptable clothing and makeup are required, they cost money and knowledge that the dominant culture hoards. A proper appearance is also often based on upholding whiteness and maleness as the de facto way to be. Appropriate versus inappropriate is a line that can shift at any point depending on who is setting the boundaries and who is crossing them. Differences in informal dress codes for various events can also be subliminal and hard to elucidate. Generally, attitudes about what makeup looks are acceptable in certain settings reveal more about society's prejudices than about makeup itself or the individual who chooses to wear it. Makeup becomes a litmus test for how people feel about race, gender, sexuality, femininity, and masculinity, and more. Even when many rights and social customs are taken away, makeup remains a touchstone for bodily autonomy, self-worth, and people's and society's priorities. In prison, women have often limited or no access to makeup, but some inmates still find ways to create it from what they do have available. U.S. commissaries in federal facilities in the 2010s may have offered limited products such as lip gloss or concealer, while state and county facilities were likely to offer even fewer options, mostly mascara and eyeliner. So when women use things like melted Jolly Rancher candies mixed with body lotion, ground up colored pencils mixed with baby powder, and coffee mixed with face cream to create hair gel, eyeshadow, and foundation. This creativity in making oneself up in prison isn't limited to a single time or place. In 1977, Linda Maxwell, an inmate of Bedford Hills Correctional Facility for Women in New York, recalled how she used toothpaste mixed with ink on magazine pages to make eyeshadow and black shoe polish for mascara. In Milan in 1908, an imprisoned woman made contraband rouge by soaking the red thread of her prison uniform in water and using it to paint blush onto her cheeks. Women in the prison also licked the whitewashed walls of their cells and chewed the lime fragments to create a white paste they used on their faces. A newspaper article about the incident at the time marveled that these women would be eager to be fashionable even though they never saw any men. In all other respects, most of the prisoners are devoid of every trait which ennobles and beautifies the lives of women, said the story, headlined, "Vanity Too Laughs at Locksmiths." The writing implied that women only cared about beauty to gain attention from men, and that wearing cosmetics in prison was an act of vanity. But in prison, wearing makeup wasn't for men's benefit. Instead, these women wanted to look and feel beautiful for themselves and to establish some normalcy and a sense of self-worth. For them, beauty wasn't frivolous or vain, it was survival. Women are often socialized to protect and encourage their beauty, but in prison, the tools to do so are denied. Society teaches women they have to be beautiful to be worth anything. And then once they're in prison, we mock, demoralize, and punish them for trying to keep to that standard, wrote Marlon Komar for Racked in 2018. Makeup is one of the things prison takes away. That a prison attempts to strip people of their individuality and autonomy by not allowing personal decoration shows how important it is. To go without it is a punishment. Self-invention is only for the free. And that's it.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for reading. Something that struck me about when you were reading is just society's fraught relationship with makeup and how people are treated differently when they're wearing makeup depending on context or who they are. And I'm really curious what your personal relationship to makeup has been over time, and then what led to your journalistic interest in it.
Sure. So yeah, I've always been interested in having fun with my appearance. I've changed my hair like a million times since I was a teenager. I've had fun playing with makeup and figuring out what I liked and what I don't like. I was interested in costume design for films and what that says about people and characters. And I noticed that there is more and more writing about clothing and fashion and what that means to the greater society. But I thought there was a lack of that kind of research and that kind of journalism for makeup. And I actually did a story on camouflage makeup, on camouflage paint. And I've always been interested in things that society doesn't take seriously because they're feminized or associated with women. And so when I was researching camouflage paint, it's the same material as makeup. It's made by a woman who is a makeup artist, and she created a company that now creates camouflage face paint for the US military and for other militaries around the world. So a makeup artist whose experience came with making people up, which is often feminized and kind of mocked and made fun of, is the founder and creator of something, camouflage paint, that is for many like the epitome of masculinity, and it's something that like soldiers wear, and it's tough and it's cool, and it's the same material, and people just use it in different ways, and different bodies may be wearing it. So that kind of got me really thinking about what else was there, and like what are we missing when we talk about makeup.
Why do you think makeup isn't taken seriously as something that people tend to use, or people like mainly women use day to day, and why do you think there's a lack of research on this?
Yeah, I think a large part of why people don't take it seriously is because in our society right now, it is associated with women, and things that women like are often written off or ignored or belittled. But I also think that there's a narrative around makeup that benefits people in power. And a lot of people in power claim that you don't have to rely on appearance, and that appearance is extra and it doesn't matter and it's silly to think about. But that benefits the status quo, because that only benefits the people who look like the people who are in power. So to not talk about that kind of upholds all the power structures that already exist. And so I think it's kind of all of those things. If you look at makeup seriously as a tool, it will reveal things about power and about our culture that people may not want to talk about or may not want to look at. And so people continue to just not talk about it.
Yeah, I think it feels like a damned if you do, damned if you don't thing. Something that, something that also struck me was there was like a sentence in your intro that said like no one can like stop being seen, which when I read it, I was like, oh no, you're right. That made me think about how sometimes I meet people who think they're above caring about their appearance, or think that caring about makeup or clothes is frivolous. Do you think people can really opt out of beauty culture or beauty standards?
I don't think you can. I don't think it's possible. I kind of wish you could, and that you could say like, oh, I'm just like doing this for myself and it doesn't matter. And you may be doing it for yourself, but the effects in the outside world are still greater than that. I got married because I love my husband and wanted to be married, but I still benefit from being a straight woman who's married in society. So like you can do things for one reason and feel the effects for a totally different reason. And I think that that's really similar with appearance stuff. You can like the makeup that you're wearing and wear it because it feels good and it's fun to you. But then when you go out into the world, there's a whole different set of consequences that you may not have control over, but you may be aware of, and you may benefit from them, or it may hurt you. And you can't do anything about that. If you're out in public, people are seeing you. The only way to avoid that is to not let anyone see you. And even that comes with its own consequences, right? Because then you're the person that like never turns their camera on or won't go outside, and you lose out on other things that way, or you gain things that way. So I think, like you said, you're kind of damned if you do, damned if you don't, because even if you do something or don't do it, there's consequences no matter what.
Mm-hmm. I really liked how in your book you really expanded the scope of discussion on makeup. In one passage which you read, you wrote, makeup becomes a litmus test for how people feel about race, gender, sexuality, femininity, and masculinity, and more. So in thinking about the book's title, which is The Power and Pitfalls of Beauty Culture, from Cleopatra to Kim Kardashian. Thinking about that, like long range of time between ancient Egypt and now, how do you think attitudes toward makeup and beauty have shifted over time, or have they not shifted over time? Have they largely, stayed the same?
Yeah, I think a lot of what I wanted to do with this book was kind of show that nothing is new, and that the attitudes people have, the stereotypes that people have about makeup have been there. And so when you look at the history of those stereotypes, it kind of helps you understand where they came from, why they exist, why we say the things that we do. I think a lot about how women are often disparaged for shopping, and they're just shopping again. They only like to shop. It's so silly. And like you see that in like sitcoms, right? Or in everyday life, people talk about it and complain about it. But then in my book, you'll see that a lot of women could only go out into the world without men if they were going to a department store or if they were going shopping. That was the one thing that they were allowed to do without a male chaperone, or that they were allowed to do on their own without any supervision. And so that was a way that women could declare independence. And so the reaction against that is to make fun of women for shopping. And it becomes this narrative that's then repeated over years and years and years. And I think that that happens a lot too with women in power. If you look at Empress Wu, she was the only woman emperor in ancient China. She used makeup and she was beautiful, and people knew she had a powerful presence. And then when she lost power, people rewrote her story and said she was vain and arrogant, and she used her beauty to manipulate people. And that narrative is something that people are still dealing with today. So beauty trends change, and what's in and out and who gets to participate might change. But I think in general, attitudes towards beauty and towards makeup to make that beauty happen are very similar throughout history and across many different cultures.
I'm also really curious about the research process for this book, because you really cover a lot of ground in time. You dive into stories from around the world. What was that like? Did you have to dig through archives? I imagine a lot of this was also hard to access.
Yeah, so I did a lot of research during the pandemic. I wrote half the book basically during the pandemic, and libraries were closed, archives were closed, people were not, it was very difficult. So yeah, I used a lot more ebooks than I ever imagined, because that was the only way to get some of these books. Because normally I go to the library and get books from all over the place, and I did a lot of talking with experts and relied on their knowledge to kind of tell me what they knew. But yeah, I really believe that if history doesn't talk about women or doesn't talk about makeup, it doesn't mean that it's not there. You just have to go looking for it, and you have to find it, because women existed, people of all genders existed, people wanted to be beautiful, and they used materials to make them that way. That's just true most of the time. And if they didn't, there's a reason why, and that is also interesting. And so I just think you have to go looking for it. So yeah, I read widely. If something piqued my interest, I went looking for it. I read a lot of academic papers. I talked to a lot of researchers, a lot of historians, I think an archaeologist. I just talked to a lot of people, as many people as I could, and read as much as I could. A lot of what I did also was kind of looking for the source of things. So if I was reading a book about makeup and it talked about all these interesting facts, I'd be like, well, how do they know that? And where did they get that from? And I tried to find as close to the first person source as I could, or a historical source. And in doing that, I found a lot of things weren't true. And a lot of things that I read in history books were not substantiated in a way that I felt comfortable was accurate. And one example is I read a lot about women in ancient China wearing nail polish that was a color that matched the color of their robes that indicated their government rank. And it's true that color of robes indicated government rank for men in ancient China. That part is true. But I couldn't find anything about nail polish. and women wearing nail polish and the color of the nail polish indicating their social status. But I read it in multiple books. I've read it in multiple papers. It's on websites. You can Google it right now and it will probably come up. But I emailed like historians of ancient China and women in costume, and no one had heard anything about this. So I think I tried as much as I could to go to the historical source and really look at how do people actually live, and is there something that can tell me what they did with their appearance, as much as I could, and just tried to find out what was true and why people lived a certain way and like why that might be interesting. So yeah, a lot of it came from looking at commonly repeated historical facts about makeup, and I looked at where that came from and then found something much more interesting was really behind it.
Did you bust any myths?
Okay, yes, I did. So I was not the only one to point this out. I don't think I was the first, but there was a oft repeated story about women suffragettes in the US and the UK in the early 1900s wearing red lipstick at marches to like be independent and show that they could do what they wanted, and they were, you know, like badass women who wore red lipstick. I like talked to so many people about who were experts on these women in that time period, and they said, no, we have no evidence of them wearing lipstick. These marches were written about in many newspapers. I read many articles. No one mentioned lipstick, and they talked about their dress. They talked about their hair, like other things. No one mentioned lipstick. There was nothing to indicate that these women actually wore red lipstick. There was also a lot of repeated in this story, people would say Elizabeth Cady Stanton wore red lipstick at the march in 1913, but she died in 1902, and people just kept repeating the story. And so I talked to some makeup experts, and they said, and some experts on these women, and they said, well, no, they wanted to be respectable because they were pushing their agenda of getting more rights for women. And so they wanted to say, like, we can still be feminine, we can still be respectable women, even if we have the right to vote. And so to do that, they pushed this image of respectability, which at that time did not include red lipstick and did not include vivid makeup. And that changed later on in the US, but at that time period, red lipstick was not respectable in that way. And so they wouldn't have used it. But I guarantee if you Google it right now, you'll come up with like a million results telling that story.
No, that's so interesting. That seems like a really interesting strategic choice on the part of suffragettes back then.
Mm-hmm.
Also, like, wondering about that being, with that fact being repeated so much, I wonder if people are projecting modern standards and of beauty onto these women in the late 1800s.
Absolutely. I think it definitely is like a modern story of like, oh, that's so cool. They use lipstick to like stick it to the man. But what is accurate is so much more interesting and so much more revealing, I think, of that time period and what women felt like they had to do. And yeah, I also think that because people don't take makeup seriously and don't take a lot of women's history seriously, nobody bothers to fact check it. Nobody bothers to look closer. So they see this thing and then they repeat it. And it's like a game of telephone where it just gets like a little bit twisted and a little bit less accurate the further you go.
And what do you think was the most fun part to research? Where were the rabbit holes for you?
Yeah, well, I had a lot of rabbit holes. That was definitely one of them where I was like, I've heard this so many times, I am losing my mind that I cannot find evidence for this. So I was like digging for that a lot. But it's hard to find things that aren't true. And so I just did a lot of digging around. I also, again, in my like makeup books and makeup history and in papers and stuff like that, I read that sex workers in ancient Greece wore lipstick as like their signal that they were sex workers. And that was also not a thing. It was eye makeup was kind of heavily sexualized, more so than any lip pigment was. And so that was really interesting. I really enjoyed looking at ancient China as well. And the stuff they did with their eyebrows was really interesting. Like a lot in different time periods, different eyebrows were in trend. And I'm not talking about like thick or thin. I'm talking about like shaving them entirely and redrawing with like 3 stripes or 3 dots or purple pigment. And there was this story in the histories of the emperor receiving like buckets and buckets of this pigment for all the concubines at his palace because they all wanted these like purple blue eyebrows. And I thought that was really interesting. So yeah, there was like a lot of endless rabbit holes to look at because I felt like everything was so cool. The protest chapter I thought was one of my favorite ones to work on because people are using makeup in really creative ways to protest injustices, to protest inaccuracies. And it's just like, I just think it's so cool that people are using this thing that has a lot of stigma and judgment and expected views in a whole new way to draw attention to something. So that was really exciting as well, to look at how people used makeup as protest.
I'm also curious, in writing the book, is there anything you didn't want to do in terms of avoiding certain topics or tropes, or I guess perpetuating certain views of makeup?
Yeah, I mean, I really just didn't want to be harmful. I really, really didn't want to repeat stereotypes and not investigate them and say things that were harmful. I am also really, I probably did say something that's harmful because I'm afraid of, I don't know what I don't know. And I did the best I could. And I talked to as many people as I could, but there's still things that I probably missed and that I don't know that I missed. So yeah, we kind of really just didn't want to repeat harmful stereotypes and not investigate them in any way. One thing I was really lucky to learn about was Indigenous face paint. And I talked to some people that were very generous and said, look, don't call this war paint. That's really harmful. That is not what this is. And that's a white person's idea of what this pigment is. And that was really valuable to me in learning about that history and learning about how many Indigenous tribes used face paint as well.
And is there anything you enjoy learning about but didn't have the time or space to address?
Yeah, I mean, there was probably a lot of stories that we didn't include that were just interesting because I feel like I found so many interesting things. But one thing I really wanted to talk about that we didn't really get into is kind of how women, often white women in power, use beauty as a shield to commit evil acts. And that's like, it's like, you could probably write a whole book on that, I feel like. But I'm thinking especially like Coco Chanel, who was a Nazi sympathizer, and people now are kind of wising up to that history, but she was like very, very cozy with Nazis at that time and like had to leave France for a while. And, you know, but she was very trendy and very in with people who could gain from her fashion and from her connections. And so I just think that's a really interesting aspect of makeup, that you can use it to kind of hide behind as this beautiful face. And I think you see that a lot in like right-wing white women groups of the like, my makeup is done, my hair is nice, so how could I possibly be evil, you know? And I think that is something I really wanted to get into, but it was hard to like fit that in with kind of the structure that we were doing.
And yeah, did you find any of your previous beliefs or assumptions about makeup challenged through this process?
I really just feel like it's so much more expansive and adaptive than I ever even expected when I was even starting my research. And so I think that my creativity was really challenged, and like people use makeup in such different ways that I never would have imagined. I really enjoyed learning about like ugly makeup on social media, where people really just use makeup to play and create this look that is on purpose weird and wild and just inventive. And that's not really something that I picture when I think of makeup. Is like, oh, I'm going to make something ugly on purpose and make this image. But that's like a thing that people do because it's fun right now and they can share pictures of it and they can find a community. And so I just thought that was really, really fun and different, and something that I hadn't considered because I when I think of makeup and think about this book, it's mostly about how people move through the world. And now people are making makeup not to move through the world. They're just making it because it's fun and they want to, and it doesn't have anything to do with like surviving outside in your day-to-day life. It's just a way. I mean, it is survival, I guess, if it's an escape and if it's fun for you, but it's different than going to work and having your livelihood on the line, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's like viewing makeup as, you know, like an artistic medium or a canvas.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So yeah, I think a lot of people see it as a necessary evil, or, oh, I have to do it to look presentable in a certain way, which is true for a lot of people. But then you can also use it to just have fun and create something weird and that you don't even have to wear outside. That the point is not to go outside in that, you know, expression.
Did you notice any generational differences in attitude toward makeup and beauty?
Yeah, I think that newer, like younger generations are generally, I guess, as always, kind of pushing the boundaries a little bit and creating new things with makeup. I know that gender expression right now is with younger generations is so much more welcome, I think, and more talked about, and there's more discussion about what gender expression means and how you can express that using makeup. And I'm hoping that it's more accepted with younger generations so that everyone can be a little freer in how they feel like they want to express their gender. So I feel like for us in the US right now, that's something that I felt like is very different, like from our parents and grandparents' generation and experience with makeup to younger generations right now is much more playful, much more expressive, much more fun, I think.
Mm-hmm. And what, over the course of like writing this book, what surprised you the most, I think, in terms of not just like in terms of like facts you learned, but like about yourself or yourself as a writer or a researcher?
That's a good question. What surprised me the most? I feel like I wasn't expecting, well, a lot of women's history is not recorded, and a lot of oppressed groups' history is not recorded. And so I think the ways people are reconstructing that history right now is really exciting, and that surprised me a lot. And just the ways people are doing that research is really interesting, because you can't always rely on someone's papers to find out about what makeup they wore, because it was passed down orally, or it was passed down in the women's pages of the newspapers that weren't as valued, and so they weren't saved. And so looking back at this history right now really means overturning a lot of different things and putting contextual clues together to figure out how people lived, as opposed to just finding a document that had a list of things that like says what's up, you know, like that's, you're not always going to find that. But you can look at paintings to see what the idealized version of someone looked like. You could look at a poem to see how they describe someone beautiful. And so just kind of putting together these context clues was really exciting and really fun, and not something I guess I expected fully when I started out.
Yeah. What was the most unexpected source that I guess you ended up drawing from, like beyond interviews with historians or academic studies?
That's a good question. So like I said, paintings were one that I kind of looked at and was something that I didn't really expect to look at.
Like what era of paintings?
Yeah, so we had the Darnley portrait, I think it's called, of Queen Elizabeth, was this like idealized version of what she looked like, and she didn't allow a lot of her paintings to exist. Like if she didn't like the way she was portrayed in it, she just like had it destroyed. And this painting was one that she allowed to be reproduced. And so you can take from that that's how she wanted people to see her, and that's what she wanted people to view her as. And so you can kind of extrapolate from that what the trends were, how she set them, how she saw herself, like how people viewed her and what that meant. And so you're looking at a painting that she okayed and approved, and then kind of drawing from that conclusions about beauty in that time period. There was also, I think, a script of a play that talked about beauty, where we looked at, and it was in that same time period, maybe around the 1700s in England and Denmark. And it clearly was talking about how people with black skin were ugly and dirty, and people with white skin were beautiful and clean. And so again, you're looking at a script in a play, but that's clear ideas about beauty and makeup and what is beautiful and what is valued in that society. And it was whiteness. And so that is reinforced again all the time in these paintings, in the play, and these sources that I looked at. So yeah, I just think that a play, a painting, I think there was like cave paintings at one point. It's just like looking at different images really can reveal a lot about beauty in that time period as well. You don't just have to look at written sources.
And the part you're mentioning about the Queen Elizabeth painting, that's sort of new for me because I'm like thinking about I guess like the legacy of, I mean, obviously the stakes are different from me as a regular person taking a selfie versus Queen Elizabeth wanting to be remembered throughout like eternity. But that's interesting. It also intersects with not only like beauty standards, but about youth, and then being remembered at your prime. Is that something? Are those like themes that you were coming across too in your research?
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's so interesting you say that, because a lot of people in power want to look powerful, and that often means young and wealthy. And so especially for a sovereign leader, you want to look like you're strong and healthy and you're going to live forever, because you don't want your power to be in question. And so Queen Elizabeth did that by using her makeup and by plucking her hair a certain way and by presenting this front. And men throughout history have also done that. They just use different tools, and they're not disparaged for it, and they're not like written afterwards that they were vain and shallow. It's just like, yeah, he was a strong man. He presented this strong front, and that's just the norm. And so, yeah, I definitely saw that throughout different time periods and different cultures, that people wanted to look young and wealthy. And a lot of that had to do with how you present your face. And that has to do with makeup, the clothes you wear, like the jewels you're wearing, all that kind of stuff. And generally that means like being wrinkle free and having smooth skin that's unblemished and stuff. And that is because they want to portray those things to be powerful.
That's interesting. That reminds me of something it's kind of a niche example, but an article that I'd read a couple of years ago was about how many reporters, many of whom are male, who reported on the White House were, becoming high profile as they were reporting on the Trump administration, and how they were getting contracts to report on like cable news. So many of these anchor reporters who have these gigs on like CNN would hire like image consultants who would like change up like the suits they're wearing, or they would like give them like a workout plan, or like do their hair differently, or even like get like cosmetic surgery it's interesting how that plays for both like men and women and people of all genders, of how your appearance is often people are using that as a barometer for how credible you are. It's obviously absurd that someone who's more like telegenic could be taken more seriously on like ABC.
Yeah. And that affects a lot of people in the workplace, and that can affect your income and your economic stability, is like if people believe what you're saying, and that can change with the color of your hair or how you cut it, or like what color lipstick you have on. And so, yeah, it's just totally wild. And there was a part in the workplace chapter where anchors talked about undergoing that like image rehabilitation and how like dehumanizing it can feel, because it's like, oh, I had to, like, they told me my tie looked like stupid, and they told me my eyebrows made people uncomfortable, and so I had to change all this stuff. And it's like, what? That's crazy. You're just a person, but yeah, it's just this like wild dehumanizing thing where you're just kind of become this image in this floating head, and that's your value is just what you look like in that moment. And that's how you can best portray information, I guess. It's just kind of crazy to think about that process.
For sure. So we're going to go to audience questions. Everyone who's here, feel free to drop any questions you have for Rae in the Ask a Question box. We have one right now. How has writing this book changed your relationship to makeup? And relatedly, as you start to promote the book, are you feeling pressure to present yourself a certain way given the topic of the book?
Kind of, yeah. I was like, oh, do I need to put on like cute lipstick? You know what I mean? I was also like worried about my author photo. Like, I'm writing about makeup. Like, what am I gonna like? Am I gonna have to look a certain way, you know, in this picture? So I don't know. I think my relationship with makeup changed a lot during the pandemic, and not just because of writing this book, but I feel like I've actually become less reliant on makeup in a way, and kind of more confident in what I'm saying and how I'm presenting myself. And that may or may not include a lot of makeup, but I'm understanding kind of the consequences of how I look that day. And so that has made me more confident, if that makes sense. I tended to use less makeup over the past year. And I was kind of married to a few products that made me feel most like myself. And so I've just stuck with those mostly personally, and then kind of let the rest go to the wayside a little bit. I've really pared down like my skincare, my makeup, just to use like what works for me. So I don't know if that is maybe an effect of kind of reading all this and seeing all the different things you can do with makeup and what it means, and then kind of deciding, well, this is good for me right now, and I feel comfortable in how I'm being presented to the world, and I feel comfortable about how I feel myself, and so I'm just going to stick with that. So I do feel a little bit of pressure to like, oh, do I need to wear fun eyeliner? And sometimes I do, but like not today, you know. So yeah, I just think it's kind of interesting if people, I wonder if people expect a more made up person to write about these things, but right now that's just not the way I'm going. So.
And over the past couple of years, as you've been working on the book, when you tell people that you're working on a book about makeup, how do they typically react? Like, have you received a wide range of like reactions?
Yeah, a lot of people are, a lot of men are surprised that it's like a thing, or like, oh, that's, you're writing a book about that? You have a publisher? Like, someone's looking at it? You're gonna sell? Like, yeah, there's a lot there. Like, I'm doing a lot of research. Like, this is like very intense. So I think people at first might expect it to be like kind of a frivolous thing. And when I say like, well, actually there's like a lot of historical research, and it's like we're talking about like race and capitalism and like how makeup affects that. And I think that there's either the person is like, wow, that's really great, that's so interesting, or like, are you sure that there's stuff, you know, are you sure makeup relates to all that? But it does. And so hopefully they'll, I don't know, read the book and find out, or listen as I'm talking and find out that it could actually be a serious topic. But yeah, I think that a lot of times it's either like, wow, that's so under discussed and we really need to talk about it, or, oh, I don't know if there's like enough there. Or like, are you sure you're writing a book about that? Like, kind of thing. It's like those two, I think, reactions.
And over the course of writing it, did you feel like you were writing for someone? Did you have some like a particular reader in mind?
I don't know that I did. I feel like I was mostly writing for myself, because I wanted to learn all these things, and I just thought it was so interesting, and I'm so excited to like tell people the interesting stuff that I found. Like, I feel like that's why I write anything, is just to tell people all the like weird nerdy stuff that I'm interested in. So I feel like I was just really excited, and I really felt privileged to be able to do this, because I learned so many things about how people live, how women live, how people of all genders live in the society that doesn't prioritize them. And I just feel like it was such a gift to be able to be let into those stories and those histories, and to like learn about that. And I know that sounds like real like nerdy and whatever, but it was really a gift, and it was really wonderful to be able to do that research. And so I just feel like it was just I just really feel like it was a selfish thing on my part to be able to like do something I was really excited about and really interested in, and hope that people would be on board when I told them about it.
No, I love that. You wrote the book you wanted to read.
Yeah. And I kind of, when I reread it now, which hopefully I'll never reread it again, but when I reread it for like 10 times, I was like, man, this is really interesting. Like, the stuff is cool. And it's, well, yeah, I picked it out. So like, that's why I think it's interesting. But I just think that a lot of things in it are really interesting tidbits about how people live and make their way through the world.
Mm-hmm. And thinking about practitioners of makeup or users of makeup and who are featured in your book, or who you spoke to, or you just like watched online, who do you draw inspiration from?
That's a really good question. Katie Jane Hughes is a makeup artist that I watch on Instagram like all the time, and she taught me how to do like eyeliner for the shape of my eye and stuff like that. But I feel like it's unending almost, kind of the inspiration. Like if I'm on I'm on Instagram a lot, and like my explore page is like different like nail polishes or different eyeshadows or different like, I just feel like there's an endless well of creativity right now on social media for makeup, which has really just been wonderful. I learned about like the YouTubers while I was doing my research. That's not something that I like personally like got into, but as I was doing research, I was like, yeah, I get why people like sit and watch this. Like, I sit and watch these videos even though I'm not putting on makeup right now. Like, I'll sit and watch somebody put it on, or do it. So yeah, I just think that there's so much inspiration right now for expressing yourself and learning how to do makeup that people didn't have access to before. Mm-hmm. And now you can sit on your phone and learn a ton of stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was actually my entry point to makeup when I was in high school. Mm-hmm. Was watching like beauty vloggers doing like, I don't know, like the no makeup tutorials and like night out tutorials, even though I was like 15 and like what nights I can be going out on.
And
go on.
Oh, I just think that's so interesting because I feel like when I was in high school or when I was like in middle school and wanted to learn about makeup, it's like you have to get like your cousin to take you to the mall and like show you how to put it on. And now it's like people can just sit at home and learn 10,000 makeup techniques, and you can be an expert by the time you're like 12 because you just watched it all on YouTube. And I just think that's like, it's just really fun and really interesting that people have that access to this expertise right now, I guess.
Were there particular makeup trends you were attracted to when you were in like middle school, high school, like, learning to use makeup?
Yeah, I have always done a winged eyeliner and was like really into that for a really long time. And yeah, I just felt like it was a fun shape. It worked with what I felt like I wanted my eyes to look like, and it just felt really good to wear it. And then in researching this book, I was like, oh man, like cat eyeliner and like the cat eye shape and winged liner has this like long and storied history. And like Elizabeth Taylor wore it and when she was portraying Cleopatra and became this huge sex symbol. And it just people became really into this eye makeup, and that kind of history like echoed onto me learning makeup when I was 12. And I didn't even know like why I thought it was cool or why people reacted the way they did. And then now that I'm looking at the history of that, it's just, there's so much more there than I ever knew when I was learning how to do it on myself, 10 years ago.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've been using, doing cat eyeliner for myself since I was in high school. And it's something that is like something that I remember you had read from the intro was, I think the idea that women put on makeup for men. In my opinion, a lot of like women put makeup on for themselves or for other women. I don't know, I noticed that like for me, if I see someone like compliment my eyeliner, it's never a man. There's just that sense of pride of like, oh, I'm being recognized, I'm being seen.
Yeah, and I think that like a lot of that is another thing that makeup can do is kind of connect you with people that have similar tastes or that know that you put the effort into making your like flick of your eyeliner just the right way because they have the experience of doing that themselves. And so it's kind of like a fun way to relate to people. And I know there was an article on The Cut, I think a few years ago about this woman who discovered this blue eyeliner and this colorful eyeliner that she really liked. And when she saw other people with colorful eyeliner, it was like, oh my God, I love your eyeliner. Your eyeliner's so cool. And they just like had this like bonding moment. And it was just a way for her to like feel recognized and feel this community of women who were like into colored eyeliner. And that I just think is such a fun thing where it's just based on looking at someone and you can connect with them in that way just based on your appearance because you made a choice that like resonates with somebody else. And that's not, I mean, that shouldn't be undervalued, I don't think, because that's how people move through the world. That's how you relate to people, and that matters, and that's exciting, and that's important. And it's not stupid just because it's makeup. Like, it's exciting because you intentionally did something to yourself that somebody else saw and recognized and celebrated. Like, that's cool.
Mm-hmm. And so we're coming up on the 5-minute mark. So if anyone has questions for Rae, feel free to drop them in the chat. And then in the meantime, unless any others come up, I'll continue to ask you questions. In talking about, like how beauty and makeup can bring communities together, have you, in your research, do you notice any communities that formed around makeup in particular, either like now, like modern day, or back then?
Yeah, I think a really interesting community that kind of came up around makeup and appearance was in the civil rights movement in the US, where Black beauty parlors were a place where people could gather and do activism. And it was kind of protected because the money from these salons supported themselves independently. So they had customers and they could pay for their salon and they could pay off the bills, and they weren't beholden to other people. They weren't beholden to other business owners or landlords or other people in power who could have kicked them out or shut down their conversation. And so beauty parlors really became a community for people to hang out in, and also to literally do activism and to form these community groups and to form plans of how to do activist strategies, because it was a safe space for people to gather, and because they were economically protected in a way that relied on beauty and hair and makeup and doing these beauty services. So I thought that was really interesting, and a really interesting part of American history, especially. There was also in China, there was a website where people gathered online to shop for each other, because certain people in certain cities had better access to makeup products. And so if you're in a rural area, you can't get the products that you need. And so you would go on this website and someone would shop for you. And it became this real community, and it like blew up, and so many people joined it and could connect with each other in that way. And it just became a way to take care of each other and find something for someone. And they were paid for their services, but still that active time and making sure they got what you wanted and finding the products and sharing that with other people was just really a way for people to connect with each other that wasn't possible before, or that they wouldn't have thought of doing before. And then it came through because they wanted a certain makeup product.
Yeah. And then when you were talking about the beauty parlors, there's also something really special to that intimacy of, I guess, someone doing your makeup for you, whether it's a friend or a parent, or like something like really nurturing about that. Yeah.
And I think that like you do makeup so that people can see you when it's finished, right? So to have somebody see you pre-makeup and before your like full face is on, that can be really vulnerable and really I don't know, it can just be like really intimate, and a way for people to kind of come together. And salons historically have been a place for people to gather, and like in France, like actual salons where people had conversations. But then in the US and in London, like beauty salons were a place again where women could go, and that was an acceptable place for people to go out of the house. And it was a community of other women where you could gather, and that was like an okay place to go. You weren't allowed to work, you weren't allowed to vote, you weren't allowed to like own property, but you could go to the beauty salon. And that was just a way that people could form connections and have actual space to be and to exist in the world outside of their homes.
Absolutely. Well, Rae, thank you so much for this conversation. I was so excited to read your book and to be talking to you about this. And I know that everyone who's here and everyone who will be watching later would be, I think everyone can find something really fascinating and powerful within this book. So feel free to pick up a copy. There is, Sarah's coming in, pre-order a book. It's coming out next Tuesday. I won't steal your spiel.
No, I love it. I don't have to be here. That was such a wonderful, wonderful conversation. Taylor, thank you so much for those amazing questions.
Thank you.
You're like such a pro. You covered all the territories. I really, really appreciate that. As Taylor said, anyone who couldn't join us tonight, this has been recorded and can be viewed anytime at the same link. I'll also be uploading a version that will have closed captioning to our YouTube channel for anyone who needs that. And yes, please pre-order the book from Women and Children First. I believe Rae will be stopping by soon to sign books, so you can get an autographed copy. Yes, and thank you all so much for joining us. Do you want to add anything before we sign off, Rae?
Just thank you guys so much for having me. This has been so wonderful. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Taylor. I'm so happy to finally talk about this book with people. I'm so excited. Thank you so much for taking the time and for having me.
Awesome. I'm so glad it's out in the world. So thank you. Have a wonderful night.
You too.